Versatile Mage. Chapter 461. The Fifth Tier. The sand-hull tiger was surprisingly brawny. Even when its limbs sank into the flowing mud from Zhang Xiaohu's soul seed, it still managed to leap into the air and land on top of the rock barrier. The rock barrier was 10 meters tall and jagged in an irregular pattern. The sand-hull tiger was standing atop it, its eyes fixed on Zhang Xiaohu, who was the closest to it. It leapt from the high ground, its figure still covered in a thick blood shadow. Mo Fan was rather familiar with the power from that layer of crimson shadow, as the might from his blood tabby was fairly similar to it. The shadow granted the sand-hull tiger formidable strength. Normally, demon beasts like it could utilize their strength better on the sturdier ground of the Gobi Desert. The creature was most likely starving if it came all the way to these sandy hills searching for food. The jagged rock barrier served as a perfect springboard for the sand-hull tiger. It lunged forward swiftly and fiercely. Zhang Xiaohu had once again underestimated the creature's speed. He was already in the midst of casting the spells, yet neither the wind track nor the earth wave was quick enough to escape from the sand-hull tiger's pounce. The sand-hull tiger was inches away. Zhang Xiaohu could see the fangs in its giant mouth, and a foul stench swept in his direction, bringing an overwhelming sense of fear. Light protection. Sacred shield. Zhang Xiaohu, who was standing not far away, reacted quickly. His light element spell immediately formed extremely sturdy-looking shields surrounding him. The sand-hull tiger slammed into the sacred shield, and it felt like it had crashed into a metal ball. It knocked Zhang Xiaohu a distance back while shaking its head on the spot, like it had a concussion. Zhang Xiaohu was perfectly unharmed. He cast a grateful look at Zhao Manyan, who responded by patting his chest, signaling him, "Go ahead and do whatever you want, I'll look after your safety." Zhang Xiaohu nodded, convinced that everyone Mo Fan had assembled was elite among magicians. They knew how to work together without unnecessary signaling, which relieved him greatly. The truth was, Zhang Xiaohu did not have any offensive capacity. His main role in the army was as the vanguard, in charge of disrupting the enemy's tempo. In simpler words, he was in charge of aggroing the mobs. As the demon beasts focused on him, it allowed the other magicians to cast their spells without being interrupted. With Zhang Xiaohu as the vanguard, Mo Fan and Chen Yi immediately cast their intermediate spells. The sand-hull tiger, still dizzy from the previous collision, immediately faced two powerful attacks, which it dodged in a panic. The sand-hull tiger's evasion was fairly outstanding. Out of the two intermediate magicians, only Mo Fan's relatively swift thunderbolt was effective, knocking the sand-hull tiger back into the quicksand that Zhang Xiaohu had set up. Half of the sand-hull tiger's body sank into the sand before it could recover and crawl out from the pit. The sand had a high viscosity, mainly because of the earth element soul seed they had obtained from the Zizhao Valley. The sand-hull tiger was unable to move freely, as half of its body had sunk into the sand. It was like a beast captured in a trap set up by hunters. No matter how fiercely it struggled, it made no difference. The more it struggled, the faster it sank into the sand. Giant Shadow Spike. Mo Fan had no intention of hiding his strength and immediately cast the shadow element spell. The giant shadow spike nailed the sand-hull tiger's struggling shadow. A dark energy transformed into a binding gas, chaining the sand-hull tiger's shadow. The sand-hull tiger could no longer move, only watch as its own body sank slowly into the sand. The quicksand pit and the giant shadow spike were a perfect combo. The muscular sand-hull tiger had no chance of utilizing its strength and was soon eliminated by the party. It seems like the infamous Dunhuang demon tiger isn't as terrifying as I imagined, Zhang Xiaohu smiled. The sand here is soft, so your earth element soul seed's power is significantly increased. The sand-hull tiger was kitted to its death before it could utilize its full strength, agreed Lingerling. Let's see if the sand-hull tiger had some kind of rare bone or skin. Those are the valuable things, Mo Fan said with gleaming eyes. Mo Fan had killed lots of demon beasts, so he was not as pleased as Zhang Xiaohou after eliminating a warrior-level creature. He was more concerned about money. Unfortunately, the Sandhull tiger did not have what Mo Fan was looking for. Even its soul was only an ordinary soul remnant. He stored the soul remnant inside the little loach pendant, treating it as a raw material to refine soul essences, as he was aiming to improve his shadow element basic spell to the 4th tier. Say, Mo Fan, why didn't you try improving your basic spells to the 5th tier? Asked Zhao Mannion, raising his eyebrows. Chen Yi, who was standing beside them, opened her eyes wide. The 5th tier, does that mean this guy has already improved his basic spells to the 4th tier? The Zhao family was considered a famous, business-renowned family in the magic community. One could find marketplaces that belonged to their family in most cities across the provinces. Many people referred to their family as a Tuhao. Despite that, she had never seen any renowned family willing to invest in improving someone's basic spells to the 4th tier, let alone the 5th tier, which was basically a fantasy. Screw you. Leveling up a basic spell from the 4th tier to the 5th tier requires a total of 7 warrior-level soul essences. Give me the money, and I'll improve them right away. Cursed Mo Fan. Zhao Mannion had made it sound easy, but if the higher tiers only needed servant-class soul essences, he would actually consider living deep in the woods for a while to improve his basic spells further. However, the resources needed for the 5th tier were too dumbfounding. 7 warrior-level soul essences would sum up to more than 100 million, enough to get him the wing magical equipment for Xingxia. On top of that, the odds of finding a warrior-level soul essence were extremely low. Even if Mo Fan managed to collect over 100 warrior-level soul remnants, it was not enough to refine a complete soul essence. Improving his basic spells to the 5th tier was a strenuous commitment. Let's move on. Stop wasting time here. You'll have plenty of work to do at the Drifting Sand River. Emphasized Lingerling. The most dangerous part of their adventure was the Drifting Sand River. Even though they had brought Xingxia the Psychic along, it did not guarantee that they could cross the place unscathed. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 462. Drifting Sand River. The party had only briefly proceeded on their journey when they saw a group of people rushing toward them through a cloud of sand ahead. As the group came closer, Mo Fan's crew realized that they were also a party of hunters, who seemed relatively young. They had to be quite talented among magicians. When they arrived and saw the Sandhull tiger's corpse, their expressions immediately sank. A female magician, slightly tanned, approached Mo Fan's group furiously and snapped while pointing her finger at them, "How shameless are you guys? We've been hunting the Sandhull tiger for half a day and injured it, yet you've stolen our prey after we lost track of it for a while. Don't you know that as hunters, you're not supposed to take other people's prey?" The tanned female magician spoke imposingly, her voice sharp and screeching, making everyone feel uncomfortable. "Auntie, the Sandhull tiger was already charging at us when we saw it. Are you telling me that we're supposed to let the beast eat us alive if we're not allowed to kill it?" Zhao Mannion blurted out unpleasantly. "Who are you calling an auntie? I'm not even 30. The tanned female magician was infuriated. "Oh, but your temperament is the same as those aunties dancing at the public squares when their spot has been taken." Mo Fan was fond of making sarcastic remarks too. He immediately joined in and sang a duet with Zhao Mannion. The tanned female magician pulled a long face and seemed to have an urge to teach the two disrespectful guys a lesson. However, the rather manly leader with a black beard stepped forward and stopped her. He preferred not to start a fight here, since they were currently in the demon beast's territory. It was better for the hunters to help one another, even though they felt it unfair that their prey was stolen just like that. They had injured the Sandhull tiger in the first place, so the creature's strength was no longer at its peak. No wonder the Sandhull tiger was so easy to deal with, Zhang Xiaohou realized. When fighting the Sandhull tiger, Zhang Xiaohou had already noticed that the beast was covered in wounds and bruises, so he thought it had fought against some other creature before. It turned out that it had fought a group of hunters and fled when it realized that it was no match for them. Somehow, it had stumbled into Mo Fan's party, who ended up taking advantage of the situation. My brothers, we fought the Sandhull tiger for quite a while. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to kill it so easily. How about this? Let us take a look if the Sandhull tiger's corpse has any rare bones, rare blood, rare skin, or something else, and we'll split the loot in half, said the leader with a black beard in a friendly manner. However, Mo Fan was not happy. These idiots had lost track of their prey and demanded that the prey was theirs after such a long time, even asking to split the loot in half. In the dreams, the Sandhull tiger was quite infamous, and its corpse was quite valuable too. Even without rare loot, a corpse in good condition would still be worth around 100 to 200,000 RMB. Mo Fan would not mind discussing other things, but when it came to money, he was not willing to give a single cent to others. How shameless, and you call yourself hunters, humph. Lingerling was not fond of the demand either. Little girl, who do you think you're talking to? The prey was ours to begin with. Come down here and I'll teach you how to behave. The tanned female magician was enraged, snapping while pointing at Lingerling. We're just following the rules set by hunters. How is this being shameless? The leader with a black beard replied with a long face. Hasn't someone taught you to respect your seniors? Retorted Lingerling. Seniors? Ha, you're funny. Look at how young you are. You must be a bunch of kids running away from your high school and fooling around. If we didn't injure the Sandhull tiger beforehand, you all would be a pile of bones by now. You should be thanking us. The Sandhull tiger isn't some creature that can be handled by someone who only talks like you. The tanned female magician mocked them. She was extremely annoying, mumbling non-stop. Meanwhile, Lingerling took out her hunter badge and showed it to her. The tanned female magician opened her eyes wide, her mouth unable to respond in time. She was staring at Lingerling in disbelief, shifting her focus back and forth to the hunter badge. A hunter badge was similar to magic equipment and could only be bound to a magician's soul. It was impossible to fake it. The group of hunters was only a bunch of advanced hunters, who still had to gain a mountain of points to achieve the ranks of Hunter Master. On top of that, the Hunter Union had requested that lower-ranked hunters respect their seniors. They were not allowed to compete with higher-ranked hunters for their prey, nor were they allowed to disrespect their seniors. The tanned female magician wore a fascinated expression and could not find words for a long time. The unpleasant expression on their leader's face stiffened too. If the little girl was already a hunter master, how about the others in her party? They had underestimated these people. No wonder the Sandhull tiger had already turned into a corpse after they had only lost track of it for a short period of time. The leader with a black beard and the tanned female magician quickly ran away with their crew after embarrassing themselves. It was their fault for being greedy, demanding Mo Fan's crew split the loot when they had lost track of their prey in the first place. They were unlucky enough to stumble onto a freak like Lingerling. It was only an insignificant interlude. The party proceeded with their journey along the pulsating sandhill. The desert was not as boundless as it seemed. After more than a day's journey, the vast sands had turned into barren, rocky land ahead. The odds of stumbling into a Sandhull tiger increased on the rocky terrain. The group tried their best to avoid the beasts, yet they had no choice but to fight when battle was inevitable. With Zhang Xiaohou in the team, the skills he had learned in the army proved extremely useful. He was able to nimbly lure the Sandhull tigers away when it was impossible to avoid contact with them. It was tough for the team to face 3 Sandhull tigers simultaneously. Most of the time, Zhang Xiaohou would be sprinting across the rocky terrain, luring the idiotic Sandhull tigers after him, so the team could move forward safely. The journey was mostly free of danger, and they eventually arrived at the drifting sand river. The drifting sand river was, in fact, a dry valley running down from the nearby high grounds, which had become incredibly wide under the erosion of the wind. Even on the map, The drifting sand river resembled a long soil-colored snake winding through the region. Its length extended through half of Gansu, and its narrowest part was still more than 10 kilometers wide. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 463. Dreadful River. Throughout this long drifting sand river dwelled horrifying creatures called the White Sand Demon. Looking ahead while standing on the edge of the Gobi Desert was a descending dry slope. Although they called it a river, it seemed more like an ocean in everyone's eyes as it followed the descending continental shelf. This sand was covered in very thin and winding white sand silt. The sizes of these silt dunes looked like waves within a white ocean. Didn't they say that this place had white sand demons dwelling around? Why haven't I seen a single one of them? Zhang Xiaohou used his hand to shade his eyes as he surveyed the area from an elevated position. Everyone also had some doubts in their hearts. At this moment, they could still see the white silt a couple of kilometers away from them. There was nothing moving within the silt. Other than the occasional layer of white waves being blown by the wind, there was nothing else moving. At this moment, Lingeling finished extracting the internal organs of the sand-hull tiger. She gave them to Zhang Xiaohou, who was standing next to her, and said, "Here, throw this into the distance." Zhang Xiaohou gathered his strength and threw the innards far into the river of dust and sand. After they landed, waves of silt suddenly exploded forth within the tranquil white scene. Several 3-meter-tall giant-like creatures stood up while supporting themselves with broadswords made from sand. They all began to surround the smelly, bloody organs. After they cautiously examined them, they all turned back into sand that sprinkled all over the drifting sand river. The entire process took just a couple of seconds. The serene ground with white sand had suddenly turned into over 40 white giants with broadswords, who then returned back to the sands and restored the peaceful scene. This shocked everyone. There were quite a number of creatures appearing from just such a small disturbance. If a whole group of us were to go there, wouldn't there be a whole white sand demon squad appearing? Zhang Xiaohou asked, his shock totally visible. Mo Fan and Zhao Manyan nodded their heads after nearly peeing themselves from surprise. Fortunately, they didn't step right in. Who would have expected so many white sand demons to explode forth in front of them? Let's set a camp by the riverside and rest. It's about to become dark. It won't be too late if we were to set out first thing tomorrow, Lingeling advised. No one was better at setting up the camp than Zhang Xiaohou. It was as though this guy was on steroids. He would have leftover energy every single day, and it seemed like he was familiar with doing everything. While everyone was resting, Zhang Xiaohou had already finished setting up the tents for everyone. There were 2 tents in total, separated by gender. Mo Fan walked up to the Swift Star Wolf. He used his hand to comb the fur on the Swift Star Wolf's neck while he asked Xingxia, who was sitting on top of the wolf, "Are you tired?" Xingxia shook her head. Just when she was about to open her mouth, the Swift Star Wolf raised his head in annoyance, as if he was saying that should have been a question asked of him. Mo Fan couldn't help but smile as he patted the Swift Star Wolf's head. The Swift Star Wolf was doing lots of labor. Not only did he carry Xingxia, he also had to carry the little undeveloped Lingeling. Lingeling was petite, while Xingxia's physique was very slim. The 2 girls together were probably not as heavy as Mo Fan. What the Swift Star Wolf found very annoying was that he could not fight in the same way as he usually did. Those white sand demons look like they only want to protect their own territory. Their characteristics are not as vicious. As the sand-roaring tiger, I should be able to appease them, Xingxia said with a smile on her face. Seeing the beads of sweat on her forehead, Mo Fan still took pity on her. However, he was able to tell that she was very happy. She had come to a place that she had never been to before, and it was also her first time being able to fight with Mo Fan shoulder to shoulder. The curtain of the night descended quickly. The temperature difference between day and night in the Gobi Desert was extremely big. As the last little bit of heat retreated from this white ground, a hint of cold silently assaulted them. The 3 girls were already sleeping inside the tent. The three guys were alternating the duty of night watch. Mo Fan was in charge of the latter period of the night. When he woke up, he immediately felt as though he was in a different world. This kind of cold, along with the unrestrained vicious wind striking his body, felt like a blade cutting right through his skin. Mo Fan lit up a ball of fire, and then casually threw it onto the ground to form a small bonfire. He was bored as he repeatedly extinguished the fire and reignited it, and this continued for about an hour. Suddenly, Mo Fan heard something moving in the distance. Although he had excellent night vision, the sky was still filled with white dust. This lowered visibility by a lot. Mo Fan woke Zhang Xiaoho up and had him guard the tents. He started toward the area the sounds came from. The noises in the distance sounded like footsteps. They came one after another. Who knew how many creatures were currently walking through the Gobi Desert? Mo Fan arrived at a stone wall. He didn't go through it, instead looking through the small cracks in the stone. Fortunately, his field of view to the front was not blocked by the white dust. He could clearly see a small group of sand-roaring tigers moving beneath the moonlight. Their roars were ear-splitting. As their feet hit the ground trembled constantly. As he looked further along, he saw a group of hunter magicians running for their lives, clearly extremely frightened. There was a total of about 6 or 7 sand-roaring tigers. If such a group appeared, they would also force Mo Fan's squad to scatter and run. Mo Fan was able to clearly identify 2 of the people in the hunter magician squad. It was the mean girl with tan skin and the leader with the black beard. They had already lost their path in their panic, their escape route bringing them toward the drifting sand river. Not too long after, they finally hit the white silt of the drifting sand river. They did not stop at all as they ran 400 to 500 meters deep into the area. At the same time, the sand-roaring tigers that pursued them suddenly halted by the river's edge, all standing at a place at the very edge. Even though it looked like they really wanted to wolf down those human magicians, they did not dare to take even a single step forward. They were all staring restlessly. They were filled with regret and anger, feeling like ducks had escaped from their mouths. Just when Mo Fan was puzzled over why those sand-roaring tigers, known to be so vicious in nature, had suddenly stopped pursuing him, a terrifying scene appeared in the drifting sand river, shocking him yet again. He saw rows of white sand demons rising from the white sands. The sand in their hands had turned into large broadswords as they chopped down on the group of hunter magicians. The hunters let out wild screams before the skies were instantly filled with blood. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 464. Panic in the River. The 3-meter-tall white sand demons were lined up in 4 or 5 rows, completely surrounding the hunters that had trespassed into the drifting sand river, leaving them no way to escape. Rows of white sand sabers dropped onto the targets. These sabers were not sharp like normal weapons, but extremely blunt, more like clubs. The slashes were actually smashing the hunters instead. As a result, it turned into a gory scene, with flesh and blood flying everywhere. The moonlight was a mix of blue and white, while the drifting sand river was white like rice, making the pools of blood on the ground even more obvious and terrifying. Mo Fan's eyes popped open. Even though he did not have the urge to save the hunters, they had died an extremely quick death. The defense from their spells was not weak, yet they still stood no chance against the weapons of the white sand demons. Their defense was crushed instantly, as their cries of agony echoed in the wide desert. My God! Zhao Manyan's soft exclamation came from behind Mo Fan. Mo Fan turned around and saw everyone had woken up and followed him from their tents. Xingxia and Chen Yi covered their mouths with their hands, while Ling Ling stared with her eyes wide. It was obvious that they had witnessed everything. The drifting sand river was a lot more terrifying than they had imagined. The hunters were like commoners jumping into a river filled with violent sharks and were torn to pieces within seconds. Why don't we treat this as a holiday trip to Dunhuang? Let's go back to where we belong, murmured Zhao Manyan, feeling his scalp turning numb and his limbs going soft. Zhao Mannion had learned from the secret tipping scrolls that the drifting sand river was considered one of the most dangerous forbidden areas in the Dunhuang region. Many hunters had lost their lives here, but when Zhao Mannion witnessed it with his own eyes, he could clearly feel his soul trembling in fear. If it weren't for the hunters that were chased into the drifting sand river by the sand-hull tigers, their party would have ended up as the ones enjoying a quick trip to the netherworld. Don't we still have Xingxia with us? Maybe it won't be that bad. Even the fearless Zhang Xiaohou began to stammer. Chen Yi and Xingxia remained silent for quite a long time, needing some time to recover after witnessing such a gory scene. Sometime later, Chen Yi looked at Xingxia with wide eyes and said, "Can your psychic element really calm the demon beasts down? If something goes wrong, won't we end up like them?" Xingxia nodded seriously after a brief thought and said softly, "The white sand demons in that area are irascible because it's stained with blood, so it's not the best idea to go through that area. However, as long as we are walking through areas that do not have the smell of blood, I can guarantee that they won't attack us. Even if you say so, I'm still uncomfortable. We'll all be dead if something goes wrong," said Zhao Mannion coldly. Ling Ling cast a disdainful gaze at the two cowards and spoke calmly. "That bunch of idiots dug their own graves when they startled so many sand-hull tigers at the same time, and on top of that, they were stupid enough to trespass into the drifting sand river. They might have a chance at surviving if they decided to fight against the sand-hull tigers, but once they stepped into the drifting sand river and caused such a scene, it was no different than jumping into hell themselves. All we need to do is be extremely cautious, and with Sister Xingxia's psychic element, we will only be crossing a dried river." Meanwhile, Xingxia had recovered from her fear. She said confidently, "It won't be a problem if we follow the original plan. However, you all must remember, don't cast any spells without my permission in the drifting sand river. Once they sense the ripple of a destructive spell, they will instinctively attack us. When that happens, we'll lose control of the situation." Zhao Mannion and Chen Yi nodded. They clearly knew that it was unrealistic to try fighting the demon beasts in the drifting sand river, but with a psychic, everything would be fine. Everyone went back to the tents with a perturbed mind, and none of them managed to get a good night's sleep. After all, the drifting sand river was only less than 20 meters from them. Who knew if the terrifying white sand demons would attack those on the shore in the morning? Everyone bore their uneasiness until morning, as the red sun rising in the east shone its rays down on the drifting sand river. The blood of the group of hunters had dried up in the wind, but the stains were as clear as before under the crimson light, reminding them that the enormous white sand river was not as calm as it appeared, but rather a place with a slim chance of survival. "Why don't someone among us go and try it out? It's better than the whole squad getting wiped out," Zhao Mannion asked weakly. "I think that's a great idea, as everyone would be convinced that the plan works. The question is, who's going to do it?" replied Mo Fan, with a hint of mischievousness. Zhang Xiaohou clearly knew it was not the best time to volunteer himself. He gave Zhao Mannion the chance to do the honor. Zhao Mannion felt like giving himself a slap to the face. Was he too bored after filling his stomach? What was he thinking, voicing such a suggestion? He still had a glimpse of hope and said to Zhang Xiaohou smilingly, "You're a brave soldier, with 2 movement spells. You can run away if something goes wrong. I'll let you do it." Zhang Xiaohou waved his hands and said sternly, "Brother Fan has told me that your defense is like a 1,000-year-old turtle. I bet even if the white sand demons appeared, your defense is able to last long enough for us to come and rescue you." Zhao Mannion glanced at Mo Fan pleadingly. Mo Fan shrugged and said seriously, "I'm the party's DPS. I'm sure that either of you two is a better candidate." Zhao Mannion wore a helpless look and turned around, glancing at Xingxia. "Go for it, it will be fine. As long as you remember that you must not cast any spell until I tell you otherwise, as it will only place you in grave danger," Xingxia said gently. Zhao Mannion braced himself and walked toward the drifting sand river. Anxiety was not the only thing he was feeling at that instant. He tiptoed his way forward, each step on the sand making his heart beat vigorously. He could hear the howling of the wind coming in his direction. In his eyes, it did not feel like a dried river, but a terrifying path to the netherworld. He had only taken a few steps when tides of white sand rose from his surroundings. More than 10 white sand demons appeared beside him out of nowhere. They stood imperiously, their bulky figures resembling samurai in white armor. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 465. Psychic Element, Pacify. Zhao Manyan's face turned pale as his eyes opened wide, filled with horror. There were around 30 white sand demons nearby, and their shining sand sabers were only inches away from him. Zhao Manyan shivered when he recalled the deaths of the magicians. Didn't they say everything was going to be all right? Why did so many demon beasts show themselves when he had only taken a few steps? Zhao Manyan could not even make any sound. It felt like something was stuck in his throat. He almost subconsciously activated his armor equipment and cast a defensive spell. However, he immediately remembered Xingxia's words in the midst of his panic. He was quite impressed by himself, as anyone else would have totally shit their pants by now. How could anyone possibly remember her warning? If he weren't worried that casting a spell would make the situation a lot worse, Zhao Manyan would have been more than happy to cast a few layers of light protection, sacred shield on himself. He would only find some peace when his figure was wrapped inside the golden shield. Zhao Manyan clenched his teeth, his figure tensed. He did not dare to cast a spell and simply stood in the middle of the white sand demons. Compared to the 3-meter-tall white sand demons, Zhao Manyan was like a midget with tender bones and flesh, who could not possibly withstand the blows from the cruel sand sabers. Zhao Manyan managed to hold his ground in the end, but the others could not help but feel worried, especially Chen Yi, who almost rushed forward to save him. Meanwhile, Xingxia was like a sky-blue lotus, standing still on a river in the desert. Her long hair drifted in the strong wind blowing right in her direction, a pleasant scent rising around her. Her gentle face was filled with a stern look never seen before, her eyes fixed on Zhao Manyan's position. Suddenly, she closed her eyes and placed her arms on top of one another in front of her chest, as if she were trying to transmit a message with her soul in a way that was undetectable to ordinary people. Mo Fan, who was standing beside her, could only sense an energy ripple, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not identify the power that Xingxia was emanating. Perhaps it was the so-called invisible power from one's soul. Pacify. Xingxia channeled the psychic element spell. As the star pattern was completed, faint ripples, like those on the surface of clear water, appeared under her feet. Xingxia's petite figure was lifted by some unknown force, with her feet dangling right above the ground, like a forest elf standing above the calm surface of a lake on her toes. The ripples on the calm lake gradually spread outward, arriving just before the white sand demons were about to raise their sabers for some meat smashing. Zhao Manyan was on the verge of falling to the ground as his legs went weak. The white sand demons had a pair of deep, hollow eyes on their sand-made faces, and inside them was a violent, dark red flicker of light. They hated other creatures disturbing their lives the most, so if anything was brave enough to step into the drifting sand river, they were sure to fling their sabers at the trespassers. However, when the ripples landed on their bodies, their fierce and savage aura completely disappeared, as if it had been cleansed by a sacred wind. The sabers that were halfway through a blow came to a stop. The creatures shook their heads and glanced at their surroundings with confused expressions. The white sand demons exchanged glances with one another, as if they were trying to figure out why they were swinging their sabers, before turning into fine sand particles and falling away as the wind swept past, dissipating back into Zhao Manyan's surroundings in the drifting sand river. Zhao Manyan sat on the ground in the midst of the blowing sand. He could almost feel his pants getting wet, yet he managed to hold the urge back, as he was much more courageous after the incident at Jinlan City. He raised his head, glancing at the crew on the shore and forced a smile, before raising his thumb at Xingxia. It was Zhao Manyan's first time experiencing the miraculous psychic element. The violent white sand demons had completely lost their urge to kill. It was definitely the best camouflage that any magician could wish for, letting them roam freely in the wild. Unfortunately, the psychic element spell was not effective against all kinds of demon beasts. As an example, the savage sand hull tigers were immune to the psychic element. "How long are you going to wait before coming down here?" yelled Zhao Manyan unpleasantly. "I thought you were going to die for sure," teased Mo Fan. Mo Fan put Xingxia onto the swift star wolf's back, so she could sit on top of the beast. She could stand on her own, but she would feel extremely worn out after standing for too long, thus it was better for her to sit on the mount. The lazy Lingerling had also climbed up on the beast. When she saw the swift star wolf groaning under his breath, she knocked on the swift star wolf's head and asked, "Is someone complaining?" The swift star wolf did not dare to offend the little naughty elf that had all kinds of ways to bully a summoned beast. He quickly behaved himself and proceeded to the drifting sand river once Lingerling and Xingxia finished adjusting their seats on him. Perhaps he too was spooked by the drifting sand river. His steps were extremely light, not daring to make any noise, afraid to trigger the white sand demons under his feet. "Xingxia, if you keep on channeling the psychic spell, doesn't that cost a lot of your energy?" asked Mo Fan. Xingxia shook her head and said, "The demon beasts here in the drifting sand river aren't as densely packed as it seems. They only gather at a specific area when someone trespasses into their territory. I've pacified the white sand demons in this area, so they won't attack us. I'll cast the spell again when we arrive in the territory of a different group of white sand demons." "Oh, that's good," Mo Fan let out a relieved sigh. "However, we didn't really estimate how long it will take us to cross the drifting sand river. I'm not sure if my energy can last until we have crossed the river," said Xingxia. As soon as Xingxia finished the words, Zhang Xiaohou and Zhao Manyan, who were enjoying their stroll up front, suddenly halted in their tracks. Clearly, they were both imagining the scene of them standing in the middle of the drifting sand river when Xingxia's energy depleted. It would surely bring them straight to the jaws of death. "The river is fairly wide, why don't we? If you're afraid, just wait for us back on the shore," mocked Mo Fan. "Not a chance, I'm just saying that I do have some potions here for your sister Xingxia to replenish her energy, just in case." Zhao Manyan had no intention of holding onto his valuable belongings, and obediently handed them to Xingxia. Now that everyone's life was relying on Xingxia, Zhao Manyan immediately treated her like a goddess. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.